Okay, so get this right. Today we're diving deep into, well, it's a neighborhood called Esperanza. And you know what that means in Spanish, right?
Hope.
Exactly, hope.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, the story totally lives up to the name. We've got two versions here, one in Spanish and one in English. And they both tell the same story about, like, this incredible community transformation.
It's really, I think, a story that makes you really think about how, corporate power and local communities can actually intersect, right? Because, oftentimes we think about these things as being totally separate worlds, but here they're working together in a way that honestly I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, no, it's not like the usual Coca-Cola shareholder writes a check kind of thing. This is different. We're talking about Don Rafael Munoz, and he actually goes to the neighborhood himself after he gets this letter from a young resident. And like right off the bat, I'm thinking, what made him actually go there?
Right. That's the thing that's so interesting. It's all about, like, his whole approach is focused on giving the community the tools they need to build a better future, for themselves. It's not about handouts. It's about Don Rafael sees potential, right? He sees potential in Esperanza, not just need.
Gotcha. So both of these sources describe Esperanza as like this really struggling place, right? Neglected, kind of forgotten, and there's all this hardship. You almost get this feeling of like heaviness, surrounding the whole neighborhood. And then bam, this sleek black limousine shows up, and who's inside? Don Rafael.
Oh yeah, what an image, right? Like, talk about a clash of realities.
Yeah.
It really highlights the inequality that we see in the world and society.
Yeah.
And Don Rafael arriving in this limousine, totally unexpected. But then you have Camila, right? This young girl, and despite all this hardship, she still has hope. She writes a letter, to Don Rafael with the help of her teacher, and she doesn't even ask for money.
Whoa, hold on. She just emailed a Coca-Cola shareholder for advice. That's kind of gutsy, but also like brilliant in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's like she gets it. She gets that Esperanza needs a long-term solution, not just a quick fix,
Right.
So what do you think Don Rafael saw in that letter that made him decide, okay, I'm going to visit this place? I mean, he could have just ignored it, right? Or sent like a donation and been done with it.
Well, I think what he saw was, it wasn't just a plea for charity. It was a real desire to collaborate. And remember, the sources describe her as wanting ideas, wanting a chance to actually build something better. I think Don Rafael saw that, and he decided to go see for himself.
Okay, so picture this. There's this meeting in the park, right? Don Rafael's there, Camila's there, all the residents. The sources really highlight this moment, like you can practically see it.
Right.
The barefoot kids, the hopeful looks on everyone's faces, and Don Rafael just taking it all in. This feels like a turning point, right?
Absolutely. There's a definite shift in his thinking. He tells the crowd, I believe in second chances. And then, get this, he says,
Okay.
I am not here to give you handouts, but to build with you.
Wow.
It's all about partnership, not charity. He had to come to Esperanza to have this realization. I mean, think about it. What does that say about the usual way we think about philanthropy?
That's such a good point. We always see philanthropy as this one-way street, right? But Don Rafael's doing something completely different, so this is where the recycling cooperative comes in. Like, this is the plan they come up with, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where Don Rafael's connection to Coca-Cola becomes super important. And I have to admit, I was a little skeptical when I first read this part, but it wasn't just funding.
Yeah.
So Coca-Cola agrees to buy the recycled materials, right, from the cooperative, which, basically gives them a built-in market. And they also provide, get this, business workshops to help the residents learn the skills they need to run the business.
Okay, so is that really altruistic, though? I mean, we're talking about Coca-Cola, a giant corporation, right? And their environmental track record. Well, let's just say it's not perfect.
Right.
So is it possible they're just, trying to boost their image with this?
That's a totally valid concern, and I think it's something to really consider. Like, is this genuine social responsibility or just a PR move? Or maybe it's a bit of both. I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but there's no denying the fact that it did provide real benefits for the community.
Okay.
And then they also built a community kitchen in the park.
Oh, wow.
Which not only provides meals, especially for the kids, but also gives residents a place to come together.
So smart. It's like they're addressing both the economic and the social needs of the neighborhood. It's not just giving someone a fish, right? It's teaching them how to fish and then helping them sell the fish.
Right.
That's got to create a sense of ownership, of empowerment for these residents.
Yeah, and the sources really describe this impact, right? Jobs are created, the community kitchen is thriving, and most importantly, you start to see this sense of hope emerge, where before there was just, well, despair. That's real change. But I think what's even more interesting is that Don Rafael doesn't just disappear after the initial investment. He keeps coming back, visiting regularly, becoming part of the community.
Okay, so he's not just some rich guy who swoops in and leaves. That had to mean something to the people of Esperanza. And then there's this really touching part where Camila, the girl who wrote the letter, she gives Don Rafael this small hand-painted glass bottle. It's got the words, "Hope never ends" on it. Esperanza nunca se termina. It's a small thing, but it seems incredibly symbolic.
Definitely. It's like, it shows how resilient the human spirit can be, you know?
Yeah.
Even when things are tough, there's always that little spark of hope. And all it takes is someone to see that spark and help it grow.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the fact that it's a recycled Coca-Cola bottle, it kind of adds a layer of irony to the whole thing, don't you think?
Whoa. I didn't even think about that. Is that like a subtle message about how, you know, even with the best intentions, things are still complicated?
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
But before we, get too deep into that, I do want to point out that Esperanza's success didn't stop there.
Really?
This idea of community-driven change, it starts to spread.
Wow.
Don Rafael actually starts helping other neighborhoods copy what happened in Esperanza, using Camila's bottle as this symbol of what can happen when people work together.
Okay, so this isn't just a feel-good story about one neighborhood. We're talking about a whole movement, a new way to think about social impact. That's where things get really interesting.
Right. It challenges that old top-down model of philanthropy. It shows the power of collaboration, of sustainable solutions.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Tell me more. So it seems like Don Rafael's approach really changes how we think about giving back, right? It's not just about giving money. It's giving power back to the community.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, instead of coming in and saying, here's the solution, he actually listens to what the community needs and helps them take control of their own future. Pretty different from that we know best kind of thing you see a lot.
Totally. But it makes you wonder, is it really sustainable in the long run? Like, what happens when the money runs out? Can a community actually thrive on its own after getting this kind of boost?
That's the big question, right? It's something I thought about a lot while looking at these sources. It's this amazing success story, but then again, is it just a temporary fix? Is that all it is?
Exactly. Like, are we just setting communities up to fail later on if they become too dependent on this outside help? It seems like a tricky balance.
It is. But one thing that's really interesting is the people of Esperanza didn't just sit around waiting for things to happen. They took action. They organized cleanups, started a community garden, even set up after-school programs for kids.
So they're not just taking, they're giving back and building something even better. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's about building a sense of responsibility, not just handing out stuff.
Right, and that's what makes this model so powerful. It's not about creating dependency. It's about starting that spark of self-reliance and community ownership, right?
Exactly.
It makes me think about how important it is to actually listen to a community before trying to fix things. Don Rafael could have come in with his own ideas about what Esperanza needed, but he didn't. He took the time to understand their situation.
And that's so important. A lot of times, the people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution, right? They just need someone to believe in them and give them the support to make their ideas a reality.
And Don Rafael was that person. He was like a facilitator, a guide, not a savior.
Right.
And let's not forget, all this support came from a Coca-Cola shareholder. It really challenges how we think about where change comes from, Even huge corporations, the ones we usually see as part of the problem, they can actually help create positive change.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance, where the company's resources and the community's needs come together. But it's got to be done right. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be about listening and working together, not just telling people what to do.
Totally. This whole story makes me rethink how change happens. You hear all these big ideas about changing the world, but this shows that real change starts small, right? It starts in the neighborhood.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's about those small steps, those individual stories that, when they come together, can create a huge waves of change. Just like Camila's bottle.
Oh.
It started as this symbol of hope in one small neighborhood, and it ended up inspiring people everywhere.
That's so cool. So how did Don Rafael actually spread this model? Did other communities just hear about Esperanza and say, hey, we want to do that too?
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. Don Rafael became like a real advocate for this whole community-driven approach.
Yeah.
He shared Esperanza's story all over the place, but he also knew that every community is different. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, right?
Right. So it wasn't just about copying and pasting the recycling cooperative. It was about adapting those ideas to different situations. I bet that wasn't always easy.
No, definitely not. It takes a lot of humility. You have to listen and learn for the people who are actually living it and believe that working together is the best way to make things happen. You can't just go in thinking you have all the answers.
Okay, so let's say you have a choice. You have some resources, but not a lot. And you can either go with a top-down solution, something that might get results fast, or you can try this community-driven approach, which might be slower and more complicated. What do you do?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it really depends on the situation. If it's an emergency, you got to go with whatever's going to help people right away. But if we're talking about long-term change, real change that lasts, I think I'd go with the community approach.
Even if it's riskier, even if it takes longer.
Yeah, I think so. Because at the end of the day, real change happens when people feel like they're in control, when they have a voice. It's about giving them the power to come up with their own solutions, not just giving them handouts.
That makes sense. So it's not just about money, it's about a change in mindset, both for the people helping and the people being helped. It's about working together, not just giving charity.
Exactly. And it's not just about money or resources. It's about sharing power, sharing the decision-making. It's about realizing that everyone has something to offer, no matter who they are or how much money they have.
So back to Esperanza. What happened after the recycling cooperative took off? Did they just stop there, or did they keep going?
Well, that's where it gets even more inspiring. The cooperative, it was like a launch pad for other things. The residents, they were so empowered by their success that they started tackling other problems in the neighborhood.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, like I said, they organized those community cleanups, started a community garden, and even created those after-school programs for kids. It was like this amazing cycle, each success leading to more action and creating positive change throughout the community.
So it wasn't just about money, it was about creating a sense of well-being, of taking care of each other.
Exactly.
Did Don Rafael stay involved through all of those?
He did, but in a different way. He was still there to support them and give advice, but he also understood that the community was ready to take charge on their own.
So he went from facilitator to like their biggest fan.
You could say that. He truly believed in their ability to create a better future, and he wanted to help them share their story with everyone.
And did he succeed? Did Esperanza's success inspire other communities to do the same?
Absolutely. Their story became this blueprint, not just for specific projects, but for a whole new way of thinking about social change.
So it wasn't just about copying the recycling program, it was about that mindset, about believing in community empowerment and working together.
Exactly. And that's what makes this story so amazing. It's not just about one place or one project. It's about a whole new way of creating positive change in the world.
It's about realizing that we all have a part to play. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a community leader or just someone who cares. We can all make a difference.
And those small acts of hope and kindness, those are the things that can change the world,
Like a little girl writing a letter or a businessman taking the time to listen.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
and when enough people do those small things, they can change everything. They can change neighborhoods, communities, even the whole world.
I gotta admit, I'm feeling really inspired by all of this. It's amazing to see what hope and action can accomplish together.
Me too. It's a good reminder that no matter how big the challenges seem, change is always possible.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I have so many questions still. What happened to Esperanza in the long run? Did they keep thriving? Did other communities succeed in following their lead? I need to know more. As we were talking about all of this, I kept thinking about Camila's bottle, It became like this symbol of hope, and not just for Esperanza, but for like everyone who wanted to follow their lead.
Right. It's a powerful image. It shows that, change really is possible. Even small things can make a big difference if we work together.
Yeah. But it also makes me wonder, was it really that simple? Like, could other communities actually copy what Esperanza did? Or do they run into problems that Esperanza didn't have?
That's a good question. And the sources do actually talk about that a little bit. Like, Esperanza was this amazing success story, but not every community that tried to do the same thing achieved the same level of success.
Interesting. So what were some of the roadblocks? Was it just a matter of money, or were there like bigger issues going on?
It was definitely more complicated than just money. Esperanza had like this perfect mix of things going for them. They had a community that was really committed, a strong leader in Camila, and a really dedicated partner in Donofrio.
Right, and of course, Coca-Cola played a huge role too. But not every community has that kind of support from a big company. And even when they do, it's not always a sure thing.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons here. Esperanza's story gives us this amazing blueprint for change. But it's not a magic formula. It's not one size fits all.
So what can we learn from the communities that, weren't as successful? What kind of traps did they fall into?
Well, one big problem was a lack of organization and leadership. Some communities tried to jump right into the recycling cooperative thing without building a strong foundation first, like trust and a shared vision within the community.
So it's not enough to just copy the plan. You need to have the right people and the right attitude in place for it to work.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you can't bake a cake without flour, right? You need all the right ingredients for the recipe to come out right.
Makes sense. So were there any other challenges that kept popping up in these communities?
Yeah, another issue was that some communities didn't really understand the market for recycled materials. Like they thought they could sell more than they actually could, and that led to problems.
So even with the best intentions, you got to have a good grasp on the economics.
Right. You can just assume that people will buy whatever you produce. You need to do your research and understand how things work in the real world.
So with all that said, were there any communities that actually succeeded in adapting Esperanza's model? Like, I'm still holding on to that optimism.
Oh, absolutely. There are actually a bunch of inspiring examples of communities that took those basic principles, like empowering the community and working together, and applied them to different problems.
Okay, tell me more. What kind of projects did they come up with?
Well, one community started a community garden using the cooperative model. So they addressed food security and economic needs at the same time. And another one created a cooperative focused on childcare, so more parents could go to work knowing their kids were taken care of.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like the same basic ideas can be used to solve so many different problems. And it shows how powerful it can be when people are creative and flexible.
Exactly. And I think that's the real legacy of Esperanza. It's not just about the recycling project itself, it's about the way they thought about things. They believed that people working together can make real progress, and they proved it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling really inspired, and I kind of feel like we should all do something with this. What can we do as individuals to support this kind of community change?
That's a great question, and a perfect way to end our discussion. It starts with realizing that we all have a part to play. It doesn't have to be huge. We can volunteer, donate to local organizations, or even just tell people about these amazing initiatives.
Yeah, and maybe we can all find our own Esperanza, right? Those opportunities to make a difference right where we are, no matter how tough things seem.
Exactly, because just like Camila's bottle reminds us, even when things are hard, hope never really goes away.